September 11th, 2023. A typical day on the Las Vegas Strip. Tourists are pouring into casinos, ready to test their luck. Hotel guests are checking in, excited for their stay. But suddenly, everything stops. Slot machines freeze. Hotel room key cards stop working. The usually smooth-running MGM Resorts empire grinds to a halt. What happened? A cyber attack, but not just any cyber attack. This one was orchestrated by a group of young hackers, many barely out of their teens, who managed to infiltrate one of the world's largest casino chains with little more than a 10-minute phone call. That's the world of Gen Z hackers, and this is the story of how a group known as Scattered Spider brought a gambling giant to its knees. That day, MGM Resorts reported a cybersecurity issue affecting some of its systems, but what initially seemed like a minor glitch quickly spiraled into a full-blown crisis. For the next several days, MGM's digital infrastructure crumbled. Hotel guests found themselves waiting in hours-long lines to check in, forced to use physical keys instead of the usual electronic ones. Slot machines, the lifeblood of any casino, stood silent. Websites for MGM's properties went dark. Even casino winnings had to be logged with handwritten receipts as the company scrambled to maintain some semblance of operations. It took a full 10 days for MGM to announce that its hotels and casinos were operating normally again, but the damage was done. The company had faced significant disruptions, and questions were swirling about how such a large, presumably secure organization could fall victim to a cyber attack. That answer, it turns out, was both simpler and more sophisticated than anyone might have guessed. As cybersecurity experts began to investigate the MGM breach, a name kept popping up: Scattered Spider, also known as Muddled Libra or UNC 3944. This hacking group had been on the radar of security firms for about a year. But who were they? Unlike the stereotypical image of hackers as lone wolves operating from dark basements, Scattered Spider is believed to be a collective of young individuals, mostly between 17 and 22 years old. Many are thought to be based in Western countries, fluent English speakers with a knack for social engineering. But what intrigues us about this group isn't just their age or the language they speak, it's how they pull off their mischief. Instead of relying solely on complex malware or brute force attacks, they've mastered the art of human manipulation. Their weapon of choice is a simple phone call. The technique Scattered Spider employs is known as vishing, a combination of voice and phishing. It's a method that exploits the most vulnerable link in any security system: people. Now, let me explain how it typically works. First, the hackers do their homework. They scour publicly available information sources like LinkedIn, gathering details about employees of their target organization. They learn names, job titles, and any other information that might make their impersonation more convincing. Armed with this information, they make their move. They call the company's IT help desk, posing as an employee who's lost their login credentials. Using persuasive tactics and the information they've gathered, they convince the help desk to reset passwords or provide access. It sounds simple, almost too simple to work. But that's exactly why it's so effective. In a world of complex cyber threats, many organizations are unprepared for an attack that relies more on psychology than technology. In the case of MGM, it's believed that the entire initial breach took just 10 minutes. A single phone call, leveraging publicly available information, was all it took to set in motion a chain of events that would disrupt one of the world's largest casino chains. But the fact that groups like Scattered Spider are so effective shows that cybercrime has come a long way up to this point. You see, in the early days of hacking, the focus was largely on technical skills. Hackers needed to be proficient in coding, understanding network protocols, and exploiting software vulnerabilities. While these skills are still important, the rise of social engineering has shifted the landscape. Today's most successful cyber criminals often rely more on psychological manipulation than technical prowess. They understand that it's often easier to trick a person into giving up their password than it is to crack it through brute force. So this shift plays right into the hands of Gen Z hackers. Growing up in a digital world, they have an intuitive understanding of how people interact with technology. They're so comfortable navigating social media, understanding corporate structures, and mimicking the language and behavior of their targets. Basically, they're born with the unique digital skill set that previous generations don't have. But there's also a very important factor. We're all generally careless enough to leave plenty of personal information all over the internet. And with that, we make their job a whole lot easier. LinkedIn profiles, company websites, and social media accounts provide a wealth of data that can be used to make phishing attempts more convincing. Now, this method is new, but the goal is often the same as traditional cyber criminals: money. And many of these attacks are part of what's known as ransomware as a service operations. In the case of the MGM hack, it's believed that Scattered Spider collaborated with another group known as AlphaV or Black Cat. This group provides the actual ransomware software used to encrypt data and demand payment. What does this mean? You know what they say, if you join forces, you'll be stronger. Just as in legitimate businesses, different groups focus on different aspects of the product. Some, like Scattered Spider, specialize in gaining initial access. Others provide the ransomware software. Still others might handle negotiations with victims or the laundering of cryptocurrency payments. That's a whole ecosystem that has made cybercrime more accessible and potentially more lucrative. It's no longer necessary to be an expert in every aspect of hacking to participate in large-scale attacks. So, what exactly happened once Scattered Spider gained access to MGM's systems? The details are still unclear, as MGM and the investigating authorities have been tight-lipped about the specifics. However, based on similar attacks and the visible impacts, we can piece together a likely scenario. Once inside MGM's network, the hackers would have worked quickly to escalate their privileges. They might have used additional social engineering tactics or exploited software vulnerabilities to gain high-level access. With elevated privileges, they could have deployed ransomware across MGM's systems. This malicious software encrypts data, making it inaccessible to the rightful owners. The hackers then demand a ransom payment in exchange for the decryption key. But why is this a big deal? Because the issue isn't just about the thousands of guests who had their vacations disrupted or the employees who faced uncertainty and stress as systems went down. On October 5th, nearly a month after the initial breach, MGM revealed that the hackers had accessed personal information of some customers from before March 2019. This included names, contact information, and even driver's license and social security numbers. Not only did the hackers disrupt MGM's operations, but they also potentially compromised the personal information of countless customers. So, potentially, we're also talking about identity theft, financial fraud, and other forms of exploitation. The impact of the MGM hack was immediate and far-reaching. For MGM, the financial cost was staggering. While the company hasn't disclosed the full extent of the damages, analysts estimate that the attack could cost MGM hundreds of millions of dollars. This includes lost revenue from disrupted operations, costs associated with investigating and mitigating the breach, potential legal liabilities, and damage to the company's reputation. To make things worse, you have to know that the MGM hack didn't happen in isolation. It's part of a larger trend that's been keeping cybersecurity experts up at night. According to cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, Scattered Spider has been involved in at least 52 attacks globally since March 2022. Another firm, Mandiant, has logged over 100 intrusions attributed to the group in the past 2 years. These numbers highlight the scale of the threat. It's not just large, high-profile targets like MGM that are risk. Small and medium-sized businesses, which often have fewer resources to devote to cybersecurity, can be just as vulnerable, if not more so. So, how did MGM respond to this attack? Initially, the company took the drastic step of shutting down many of its systems to prevent further spread of the malware. This is why slot machines went dark and hotel operations had to revert to manual processes. While this caused significant short-term disruption, it likely prevented even more damage. By isolating affected systems, MGM may have limited the hackers' ability to move laterally through their network. Then, MGM also brought in external cybersecurity experts to assist with the investigation and recovery efforts. The company worked closely with law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, to track down the perpetrators. Now, I know what you're thinking. There must be someone to blame, an employee who messed up and jeopardized a billion-dollar company, right? But before pointing fingers, it's important to understand that the criminals are young enough to still be underage, yet they know more about social engineering than any other hacker. Also, human error is often the biggest vulnerability. No matter how sophisticated your technical defenses, a single mistake by an employee can compromise everything. The solution? Maybe better training and less phone calls at work. But perhaps the most important thing is something we all need to keep in mind. Public information can be a double-edged sword. How much personal information really needs to be public? Sure, transparency is generally good for business, but how much is too much? Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. From the C-suite to frontline employees, everyone needs to be educated and vigilant about cyber threats. We'll need to prepare for the next generation of hackers, more connected, better prepared, and advancing at a faster pace than ever before. The MGM hack by a group of young hackers armed with little more than publicly available information and persuasive phone skills. It's not a movie about thieves with George Clooney and Brad Pitt, though it sounds like a pretty good plot. It's the reality of cyber criminals who aren't just hacking systems, they're hacking human psychology. And that's the future. Whether you're a multinational corporation or an individual user, the next major breach could be just a phone call away. So you better watch out for who's on the other end of the line. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. See you in the next one.